The stray cat woman who slept behind my restaurant. A chef's late-night routine on Asteria was a symphony of clanking pots and quiet solitude, until the night he found hunger etched into the luminous green eyes of a creature with black fur, huddled behind his diner. Was she simply a stray, or something far more profound, exiled to the alley's cold embrace? His quiet life was about to discover secrets whispered across the galaxy, wrapped in the guise of a starving catwoman seeking scraps. This encounter would redefine home, love, and the very meaning of belonging. Torvin's quiet life, a meticulous dance of spatula against grill and the rhythmic hiss of the deep fryer, usually ended in predictable solitude. He valued the silence of his kitchen after closing, a familiar solace that settled over him as the last customer left, and the streetlights of Asteria glowed softly through the grimy window. Tonight was no different, or so he thought. He scrubbed the final pot, the metal clanking against the sink's basin, a sound he had perfected into a quiet art over years. The scent of cooked synth meat and spiced grav sauce lingered, a testament to another day's work at the Asteria plate. He dried his hands on a clean towel, a sigh escaping him. His muscles ached, a comforting fatigue. The clock above the service window blinked 0200, time to lock up. He extinguished the main kitchen lights, plunging the space into a comfortable dimness, and moved towards the back exit. A draft always snaked in from the alley door, a reminder of the raw, cool Asterian night beyond his warm sanctuary. As he reached for the deadbolt, a faint rustling sound caught his attention. It wasn't the usual wind or the scurry of a native alley rat. This was a deliberate, quiet movement, almost hesitant. He paused, his hand hovering over the cold metal. Curiosity, a rare visitor in his routine-driven world, pricked at him. He pulled the door open just a crack, peering into the gloom. The alley, usually a canvas of shadow and discarded crates, held a new, unexpected form. Huddled beside an overflowing waste receptacle, almost swallowed by the darkness, was a creature. Her back was to him, a sleek expanse of black fur, but her head turned with an unnerving swiftness at the slight creak of the door. Luminous green eyes, wide with a hunger that twisted his gut, fixed on him. She was not an animal, not truly. Her form was slender, undeniably humanoid, yet covered in fine, dark fur. Two pointed ears twitched atop her head, and a long, graceful tail, tipped with a tuft of darker fur, swept softly against the grimy concrete. She wore tattered remnants of what might have once been clothes, now little more than dark rags clinging to her frame, hinting at profound hardship. Her movements, even in her desperate crouch, held a feline grace, a coiled tension. She was scrounging, her clawed fingers delicately sifting through a discarded food container, seeking anything edible. Torvin felt an immediate pang of concern, a quiet jolt of recognition for a desperation he understood. He had seen hunger before in the eyes of travelers passing through, but never like this. This was a deep, primal need, etched into every line of her fragile posture. His mind raced, processing the impossible. Where did she come from? What was she? Asteria had no such indigenous species. He carefully pushed the door open a little wider, ensuring his movements were slow, non-threatening. The creature froze, her green eyes still locked on him, reflecting the faint kitchen light. She looked ready to bolt, a wild thing caught in the open. He held up his hands, an unconscious gesture of peace. "Hey," he said, his voice a low rumble, careful not to startle her. "Easy now." She didn't respond, her gaze unwavering, assessing him with an intensity that felt ancient. He could almost hear the rapid beating of her heart, or perhaps it was his own. Her breath plumed faintly in the cool air, a shallow, rapid rhythm. He saw the faint tremors in her limbs, not just from the cold but from fear. He realized his presence, however well-intentioned, was a threat in her world. He backed away from the doorway slowly, leaving the door ajar. He moved towards the warmth of the cooling stovetop. His mind shifted from closing procedures to a new, urgent task. He couldn't just leave her there. The image of her desperate eyes burned in his memory. He grabbed a fresh bowl, then pulled out a container of the evening's leftover stew, a hearty blend of synth beef, nutrient-rich tubers and savory herbs. It was still warm from the slow cooker. He ladled a generous portion into the bowl, the aromatic steam rising. The smell, he hoped, would be enticing, not alarming. He added a slice of fresh bread, knowing the basic comfort it offered. Every movement was deliberate, quiet. He carried the bowl carefully back to the alley door, placing it gently on the ground just outside the threshold. The metal clinked softly as it met the concrete. He then stepped back, moving into the deeper shadows of the kitchen, giving her space, giving her choice. He watched from the doorway, a silent observer. The creature's head remained perfectly still for a long moment, those luminous green eyes darting between him and the steaming bowl. Suspicion warred with overwhelming hunger in her gaze. Then, with a burst of speed that startled him despite his anticipation, she darted forward. Her movements were a blur, a whisper of motion. She snatched the bowl with both hands, clutching it like a precious treasure, and then, just as quickly, she melted back into the deeper shadows behind the waste receptacle, vanishing almost entirely. The only evidence of her presence was the faint clink of the spoon against the ceramic as she began to eat, a sound of desperate, ravenous consumption. Torvin stood there, leaning against the doorframe, the cool night air seeping into the kitchen. He couldn't see her, but he could hear her. He felt an unexpected pang of concern, a quiet curiosity about her mysterious origins. Her eyes held an ancient sorrow he could not place, hinting at something far beyond his small world of Asteria, beyond the familiar rhythm of his diner. He wondered who she was, where she came from, and why she was here, starving in his alley. The silence returned, but it was no longer familiar. It was now filled with the unspoken questions of a galaxy and the quiet understanding between two lonely souls, sharing a moment on the fringes. He would leave the door ajar tonight. Torvin made it a habit. Each night, after the last diner patron left and the clatter of dishes faded, he prepared a bowl. Not scraps, but fresh, warm sustenance. He varied the meals, sometimes a rich stew, other times grilled protein and roasted vegetables. He always left it just outside the alley door, retreating to his usual observation spot. He never spoke, only watched. Weeks bled into one another. He learned her rhythm. She appeared only after the deepest quiet descended upon Asteria's streets. Her movements were always fluid, silent, her black fur blending with the night. Her luminous green eyes, however, were impossible to miss. They were constantly scanning, assessing, a whirlwind of awareness. He noticed the way her ears, set high on her head, twitched at the faintest distant sound. Her agility was extraordinary. She could scale the tall waste receptacle with effortless grace, vanishing onto the low roof of the adjacent building in a blink. She was no ordinary creature. One particularly cold night, the wind howled through the alley, carrying a biting chill. Torvin left the bowl, but instead of retreating fully, he kept the alley door ajar, letting a sliver of kitchen warmth spill out. He watched her approach, her fur ruffled by the wind, her shoulders hunched. She ate quickly, shivering. Torvin took a slow, deep breath. "It's warmer inside," he murmured, his voice soft, almost a whisper. He kept his gaze on the floor, not wanting to startle her, just a little. Her head snapped up, her eyes fixing on him. A low, guttural growl rumbled in her chest, a warning. It was a sound of deep-seated fear, not aggression. "No threat," he said, still quiet. He slowly extended his hand, palm open, empty, just warmth. She watched his hand, then his face. Her gaze was intense, analytical. The growl subsided, replaced by a soft, uncertain whine. She took another bite of food, then looked at the open door, then back at him. The internal conflict was clear in her posture. He waited, offering patience. After a long moment, she finished the last morsel. She looked at the warmth emanating from the kitchen, then back at Torvin. A shiver racked her frame. Then, with a hesitant, almost imperceptible step, she moved towards the open doorway. She paused on the threshold, her body tense, ready to bolt. Torvin remained still, a statue of quiet invitation. "It's safe," he whispered. She slipped inside, moving like a shadow, positioning herself near the oven's residual heat, but still far from him. Her eyes never left him. He felt a surge of quiet triumph, a fragile bridge built. "Good," he said, a genuine smile touching his lips. He busied himself with a few minor tasks, deliberately keeping his back to her for a moment, giving her more space. He wiped down a counter, the soft swipe of the cloth the only sound. Over the next few nights the ritual continued. She would come inside, drawn by the warmth. She always chose a spot near the back, observing him. He never pressed, never approached. He simply worked, a silent, comforting presence. He noticed her watch him prepare food, her nose twitching, her luminous eyes following his every move. One evening, as he was stacking clean dishes, she made a soft, questioning sound. It was not a growl but a higher-pitched vocalization, almost like a query. He turned slowly. "Did you want something?" he asked, his voice gentle. She blinked. Then, to his astonishment, she spoke. "Food." The word was rough, unpracticed, the syllables halting. It was a foreign sound on her tongue, yet undeniably human. Torvin froze. "You can speak," he said, his voice laced with wonder. She nodded once, a quick, jerky motion. "Hunger," she added, pointing vaguely to her stomach. He understood. "Yes," he said, "always food." He placed a small portion of a savory pastry he had made earlier on a clean plate and slid it across the floor towards her. She devoured it, her movements less frantic now, more like someone tasting a long-forgotten pleasure. "What is your name?" he asked, trying to keep his tone even. She paused, looking at him. Her green eyes held a flicker of something ancient, something weary. "Vex," she finally said, the word a soft exhalation. "Vex," he repeated, letting the name settle in the quiet kitchen. It felt right, fitting her elusive nature. "I'm Torvin." She made a small sound he couldn't quite interpret, a soft rumble. He thought it might be an acknowledgement, or perhaps a sign of understanding. He noticed her gaze drift towards the windows, then back to the closed alley door. Her posture was always subtly coiled, ready for flight. He knew the fear was still a deep part of her. He decided to test something. "Do you like the quiet here?" Vex nodded, a little more fluidly this time. No loud. Her eyes narrowed slightly. No long dark. "Long dark?" Torvin asked, intrigued. "What do you mean?" She shifted, her gaze distant, unfocused. "Lost, home." The words were clipped, almost painful to utter. Empty. He understood lost and home, but long dark remained a mystery. It hinted at something vast, something terrifying. "You're far from home, aren't you, Vex?" he said, his voice full of empathy. She looked at him then, truly looked at him, and for the first time he saw not just fear but a profound loneliness reflected in her luminous green eyes. It mirrored his own. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "very far." Their shared meals became more than just sustenance. They were quiet conversations, filled with unspoken understanding. Torvin noticed her profound aversion to sudden movements or loud noises. A dropped pan would send her scrambling under a counter, her body trembling. He learned to move slowly, deliberately. He spoke in hushed tones, creating a sanctuary of calm within his kitchen. He often found himself watching her, a quiet warmth spreading through him. He was no longer just a chef. He was a guardian, slowly piecing together the story of a lost soul, one hesitant word at a time. The quiet solitude of his life had been shattered, replaced by a far more profound connection. Torvin often caught himself watching Vex as she moved through his kitchen. She had an uncanny grace, a silent fluidity that made her seem like a shadow given form. Her luminous green eyes, once solely filled with terror, now held glimmers of curiosity, even a flicker of contentment when he spoke in his low, reassuring voice. He learned her rhythms, her preferred spot by the warmth of the oven, her habit of cleaning her paws meticulously, the way her ears would swivel, catching sounds he couldn't perceive. Their shared meals evolved. He no longer just placed food for her, he sat opposite her at a small table, eating his own dinner. She watched him, mimicking his actions with surprising accuracy. One evening he carefully peeled an Asterian apple, slicing it into thin wedges. Vex watched his hands, then reached for a nearby fruit, attempting to replicate the motion with her sharp claws. Her attempt was clumsy, but the intent was clear. "You want to help?" he asked, a small smile touching his lips. She tilted her head, a soft rumbling sound emanating from her chest. "Help?" "Yes, like this," he demonstrated, slicing another piece. He offered it to her. She took it, tasting it cautiously, then ate it with evident pleasure. He decided to test her further. After dinner, as he began to wipe down the counters, Vex watched him, her gaze intense. He handed her a clean cloth. "Clean," he said, demonstrating the circular motion on the stainless steel. Hesitantly, she took the cloth. Her fingers, though slender, gripped it firmly. She mimicked his movements, slowly at first, then with increasing confidence. Her natural precision made her surprisingly adept. He found himself smiling more often. The kitchen, once his solitary domain, now felt less empty. Her presence was a quiet comfort, a gentle warmth against the long nights. One evening he tried again to understand her past. "The long dark, Vex, what is it?" Her body stiffened. The green in her eyes seemed to dim, replaced by a distant, haunted look. She dropped the cloth she was holding. "Empty," she whispered, her voice strained. "So long. No light, only stars. Cold." She shivered, wrapping her arms around herself. "Gone." "Gone," Torvin prompted, his voice gentle. She shook her head, turning away from him. Her fear of the topic was palpable. He didn't push it. He understood that some wounds were too deep to probe. He simply reached out, offering a hand which she hesitantly took, her fur soft against his palm. He squeezed lightly, a silent promise of safety. Days turned into weeks. Vex continued to help him in the kitchen. She learned to sort vegetables, to stack clean dishes, even to wipe down tables in the small dining area once Torvin had closed for the night. Her movements were always efficient, her focus unwavering. Torvin found her quick mind fascinating. She understood complex instructions faster than many humans he knew. Their bond deepened with each shared silence, each small act of trust. Torvin taught her the names of ingredients, the purpose of different utensils. She absorbed it all, her green eyes bright with intelligence. He noticed she often watched the street outside through the dining room window, always from a hidden spot, never fully exposing herself. Her vigilance never truly wavered. One particularly busy day, a delivery truck rumbled down the street, its air brakes hissing loudly as it stopped directly outside the diner. The sudden, piercing sound tore through the quiet kitchen. Vex gasped, a sharp, guttural sound Torvin had never heard from her before. She dropped the stack of clean plates she was carrying, though by instinct she managed to catch them before they hit the floor. Her body convulsed. She pressed her hands to her ears, whimpering, her eyes wide with unadulterated terror. She didn't scramble under a counter this time. She simply froze, trembling violently, a raw, primal fear radiating from her. Torvin rushed to her side, his own heart pounding. "Vex, it's all right, it's just a truck." He kept his voice low, calm, pulling her gently into his embrace. Her body was rigid, cold despite the kitchen's warmth. She began to utter a string of sounds, a language he didn't recognize. It was melodic, yet filled with a profound sorrow, a desperate plea that twisted his gut. The sounds were guttural, beautiful, and utterly heartbreaking. He held her close, stroking her fur, letting her tremors subside against him. He felt the rapid beat of her heart against his chest. The truck eventually pulled away, its engine fading into the distance. Slowly, the fear began to recede from Vex's eyes, replaced by a deep exhaustion. "Long dark," she whispered again, her voice hollow, clinging to him. "Loud, always loud, then empty." Torvin felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Asterian night. This was not just a fear of loud noises. This was the echo of an unimaginable trauma, a memory of something vast and terrible. He held her tighter, his resolve hardening. He didn't understand her past, not fully, but he understood her pain. And he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that he would protect her. This quiet kitchen, his quiet life, was her sanctuary. He would guard it fiercely. Days passed with a renewed quiet, a fragile peace that settled over the diner. Vex remained wary, her green eyes often scanning the alley entrance, a ghost of the recent terror still clinging to her. Torvin watched her, his heart a constant, quiet beat of concern. He found himself listening more intently to the street sounds, his senses sharpened by a new, protective instinct. He taught Vex how to prepare certain dishes, her nimble fingers surprisingly adept at chopping vegetables and kneading dough. They worked in a comfortable, unspoken rhythm, the silence between them filled with understanding. Then the whispers started. Torvin heard them first from his regulars, casual mentions of an off-worlder ship at the Asterian spaceport. Asteria was a quiet trading hub frequented by local freighters, but a genuinely alien vessel was rare. The chatter grew, laced with curiosity and a touch of unease. Torvin felt a cold prickle on his skin. This was not normal. One afternoon, while restocking his dry goods, Torvin saw it. A sleek, angular ship, unlike anything local, had settled at the far edge of the small spaceport. Its hull gleamed with an unfamiliar metal, and a strange, almost predatory elegance marked its design. It looked too advanced, too sharp for Asteria's laid-back atmosphere. He watched it for a long moment, a knot tightening in his stomach. "Torvin?" Vex's voice was a soft question from behind him. She had followed him to the back storeroom, her presence a silent comfort. He turned, a grim expression on his face. "There's a new ship, Vex, down at the port." Her head tilted, her ears twitching. She moved past him, her steps light, to peer through the small, dusty window. Her eyes, usually luminous, suddenly went wide, reflecting the distant metallic gleam of the ship. A low growl, deep in her throat, vibrated through the small room. Her fur bristled, every muscle in her body tensing. It was a reaction far more intense than her fear of the delivery truck. This was primal, absolute terror. "Vex, what is it?" Torvin asked, rushing to her side. He could feel the raw fear radiating from her, a palpable wave of distress. She lifted a trembling paw, pointing a slender, dark claw towards the ship. Her gaze was fixed on a symbol etched into its hull, a stylized, three-pronged mark that looked like a bird of prey. "The mark," she whispered, her voice a thin, reedy sound, barely audible. "Kalen, hunters." Torvin's breath hitched. Kalen. The word resonated with an ancient sorrow, a name whispered from a place beyond the stars. Hunters. He looked from the terrifying ship to Vex's contorted face. This wasn't just a lost creature he was protecting. This was a survivor, hunted across the void. The truth hit him like a physical blow. His quiet life had truly ended the moment he opened his alley door. He was protecting a refugee from an interstellar conflict, and that conflict had just landed on his doorstep. "They found me," Vex whimpered, pressing herself against Torvin. "The long dark, they chase." He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close, trying to absorb her tremors into his own steady frame. "No," he said, his voice firm, though his heart hammered against his ribs. "They haven't found you. Not yet." He looked at the distant ship again, its silent menace now a clear and present danger. His diner, his sanctuary, was no longer safe. Over the next few days, a tall, gaunt figure began to frequent the diner. He was human, but his clothes were too sharp, too clean for Asteria. He sat alone, nursing a single cup of Jaline tea, his eyes darting around the room, always returning to the kitchen entrance. He never asked about Vex directly. Instead, he made casual inquiries to Torvin's regulars, questions about new faces in town, about any unusual occurrences or strange animals spotted in the alleys. Torvin caught snippets of these conversations as he moved between tables. The stranger's questions were too specific, too pointed. Torvin felt a cold dread settle deep inside him. This was not a tourist. This was a predator. He saw the stranger's eyes linger on the kitchen window, a calculating gleam in their depths. Vex, too, sensed the threat. Her movements became even more cautious. She stayed hidden in the kitchen, her luminous green eyes constantly scanning, her ears swiveling towards the diner's entrance at every new sound. She helped Torvin with the dishes, but her focus was split, her instincts on high alert. One evening, as Torvin wiped down the counter after closing, the gaunt man was the last customer. He stood up, his movements fluid, almost silent. He walked to the counter, his gaze meeting Torvin's. "You run a good establishment, chef," he said, his voice smooth, devoid of any local accent. "Always heard Asteria had good food, and quiet, though I hear things are changing." He paused, a faint, unsettling smile on his lips. "Heard there's been some unique arrivals lately." Torvin's hand tightened on the rag. He met the man's gaze steadily. "Asteria is always changing," he replied, his voice even. "Life moves on." He offered no further information, his posture radiating quiet defiance. The man's smile widened slightly, a flicker of something predatory in his eyes. "Indeed, it does." He turned and left, his footsteps soft on the street. Torvin stood frozen, watching him go. He knew without a doubt that the quiet of his life and Vex's fragile safety had been shattered. He walked to the kitchen, finding Vex huddled by the back wall, her eyes wide with unspoken fear. He knelt beside her, pulling her close. His quiet kitchen, once a refuge, was now a beacon in the galactic dark. He might be just a chef, but he had found something worth defending with every fiber of his being. Their alliance was no longer just about survival. It was about love, a quiet, fierce defiance against a universe that sought to tear them apart. He would not let that happen. Torvin barely slept. The man's unsettling smile had etched itself into his mind. He watched Vex through the quiet hours, her eyes constantly alert even in sleep. The diner opened as usual, but the comforting routine felt like a fragile disguise. He could not shake the feeling of being watched. Mid-morning, the gaunt man returned. He entered the diner, ignoring the empty tables, his eyes sweeping past the few early customers to fix on the kitchen door. Torvin felt a cold dread seize him. Vex was in the back, helping organize dry goods, a task she had come to enjoy. The man walked straight to the service counter. "Chef," he greeted, his voice low, a predator's purr. "I believe you have something of mine." Torvin gripped the counter's edge. "I have no idea what you are talking about," he said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. He subtly moved to block the man's view of the kitchen door. "Oh, I think you do," the man countered, a flicker of impatience crossing his face. A small, dark-furred creature, green eyes, skittish. He leaned in, his voice dropping further. "She's a Kaelan refugee. Illegal, and she has a price on her head." Behind the kitchen door, Vex froze. Torvin felt her presence, a sudden, sharp stillness. She had heard. "There's no one like that here," Torvin stated, his resolve hardening. He would not betray her. The man chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Don't play games, chef. My sensors picked up her unique biosignature. She's here, and I'm not leaving without her." He reached into his coat, his hand moving with alarming speed. Torvin reacted without thinking. He grabbed the nearest heavy frying pan, swinging it in a wide arc. The man dodged with unnatural agility, a small, sleek energy weapon appearing in his hand. It hummed softly, a sound that made Vex whimper from behind the door. "Put it down," Torvin commanded, his voice raw. He might be just a chef, but he had faced down angry customers and hot grease. This was different, yet the protective instinct was the same. The man smirked. "Foolish human, you cannot protect her." He aimed the weapon not at Torvin but at the kitchen door. Vex burst through, a blur of black fur and green eyes. She didn't attack. Instead, she launched herself at the man's arm, not to harm but to deflect. Her claws scraped against his sleeve, distracting him for a crucial second. The energy bolt went wide, searing a mark on the wall instead of the door. "Run, Torvin," Vex hissed, her voice laced with terror and desperation, alien words mingling with her plea. Torvin understood. This was not a fight he could win with a frying pan. This was about escape. He grabbed Vex, pulling her close, and shoved her towards the back exit. "Go, now." They burst out into the alley, the familiar path now a frantic escape route. Torvin ran faster than he ever had, Vex a swift shadow beside him. The alley opened onto a maze of service roads and narrow passages between buildings. Vex didn't hesitate. She led the way, her movements fluid and silent, weaving through dumpsters and over low walls. Torvin struggled to keep pace, his lungs burning, the heavy thud of the bounty hunter's footsteps echoing behind them. "Where are we going?" Torvin gasped, his side aching. "Hidden paths," Vex replied, her voice strained. "Forgotten ways. They won't follow." She darted into a gap between two warehouses, so narrow Torvin had to turn sideways to squeeze through. He heard the bounty hunter curse, the sound of metal scraping as he forced his way into the tight space. They were gaining on them. Vex scaled a stack of crates, landing lightly on a flat rooftop. "Climb," she urged, extending a hand to Torvin. Her strength surprised him. He hauled himself up, his muscles screaming in protest. From the rooftop they could see the bounty hunter below, scanning the alley, momentarily confused. "He's fast," Torvin panted, pulling himself fully onto the roof. "He's a hunter," Vex confirmed, her eyes darting across the urban landscape. "He will not give up." She led him across the rooftops, leaping gaps Torvin could barely clear. He pushed himself, adrenaline coursing through him, driven by the image of the energy weapon and Vex's terrified eyes. His diner, his quiet life was gone, but Vex was here. That was all that mattered now. They jumped from roof to roof, each landing jarring Torvin's body. Vex moved with a primal grace, her senses acutely aware of their pursuer's position, guiding Torvin with subtle nudges and urgent whispers. They descended into a forgotten industrial zone, a labyrinth of abandoned factories and overgrown machinery. Rusting gantries and crumbling walls offered cover, but also treacherous footing. "We need to lose him," Torvin said, his voice regaining some control. "He'll anticipate us heading for the spaceport." "He will," Vex agreed, her ears swiveling. "But not here." She pointed to a narrow, dark opening beneath a collapsed wall, leading into what looked like a subterranean access tunnel. "This way." Torvin hesitated for only a second. The tunnel was dark and smelled of damp earth and stale air, but it promised escape. He followed Vex into the gloom. The tunnel twisted and turned, a forgotten archery beneath Asteria's surface. Vex's luminous eyes provided the only light, casting an eerie green glow on the rough-hewn walls. They walked for what felt like hours, the silence broken only by their breathing and the drip of water. Torvin's mind raced. He had lost everything material. His diner, his home, his carefully built routine. Yet a strange sense of liberation settled over him. He was no longer just a chef. He was a protector, an ally. He had chosen this. "Are you all right?" Vex asked softly, stopping and turning to face him. Her green eyes, usually filled with fear, now held a fierce determination, tempered with concern for him. "I am," Torvin replied, a small, genuine smile touching his lips. He reached out, gently touching her fur-covered arm. "Are you?" Vex leaned into his touch for a moment. "Better," she whispered. "With you." Her voice held a depth of emotion that warmed him despite the cold damp of the tunnel. This is what it was like on Kaelin, running, hiding. A shadow crossed her face. "But we're together now," Torvin said, his voice firm. "We face this together." He realized the true meaning of their alliance. It wasn't just about him protecting her. It was about mutual survival, mutual trust, a shared future, whatever it might hold. This was not the quiet, solitary life he had known, but it was far from empty. It was full of purpose. Vex looked at him, her green eyes shining. Together she echoed, a quiet strength returning to her voice. She took his hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "We will find a way." They continued deeper into the subterranean network, a new resolve settling between them. The hunt was on, but they were no longer just prey. They were a team, forged in fire, ready to face whatever the galaxy threw at them. The warmth of Vex's hand in his was a promise, a silent declaration that even in the deepest dark they were not alone. Their love, once a quiet connection in an alley, was now an unyielding force against a dangerous universe, shining brightly in the gloom. Their journey had just truly begun. The tunnel's faint green glow pulsed, revealing rough rock that gave way to smoother, ancient masonry. Vex pulled Torvin forward, her grip unwavering. She moved with an innate sense of direction, her eyes constantly scanning the shadows. Torvin felt the unfamiliar chill, a contrast to his familiar diner kitchen, but the warmth of Vex's hand anchored him. "They will have trackers," Vex murmured, her voice low. "Kalen hunters use specific energy signatures. They follow warmth, biological heat." "So we're leaving a trail," Torvin stated, his brow furrowed. He scanned the tunnel walls. "Is there any way to mask it?" Vex shook her head. "Not easily. Not without technology we do not possess. We must move faster, further." They pressed on, the silence punctuated by their footsteps and Vex's occasional soft vocalizations, almost like a purr, as she navigated. Torvin noticed subtle variations in the air, a shift from damp earth to something drier, metallic. He felt a faint tremor underfoot. "The ground is changing," Torvin observed. "Feels like we're entering something constructed." Vex nodded, her ears twitching. An old network, not Kalen engineering but ancient Asterian, forgotten perhaps. They turned a corner and the tunnel opened into a vast, cavernous space. It was a relic of a bygone era, a forgotten subterranean station. Rusty gantries crisscrossed above, leading to dark alcoves. Dust motes danced in the slivers of weak light filtering from unseen vents far above. Old, non-functional machinery stood like silent sentinels, covered in millennia of grime. "This is it," Torvin breathed, his voice echoing. "A place to hide for a while." He started towards a section of what looked like abandoned control panels, his chef's pragmatism kicking in. "Maybe there's residual power, a light, anything." Vex stayed near the entrance, her senses alert. "We cannot stay here long. The hunters will expand their search. They are relentless." She moved with fluid grace, examining the derelict structures, her fingers brushing against corroded metal. "But this offers temporary cover, a chance to plan." Torvin found an old service panel, surprisingly intact beneath layers of dust. He began to examine the wiring, his mind shifting from culinary creations to rudimentary electrical systems. He had always been good with his hands, fixing things in his diner when they broke. Vex watched him, a quiet admiration in her luminous green eyes. "You are very resourceful," she said, her voice soft. Torvin grunted, pulling at a wire. "Just practical. We need light. We need to see what we're dealing with." After a few moments of focused work, a small indicator light flickered on the panel, then a low hum filled the air. A single, weak overhead light sputtered to life, casting long, dancing shadows across the cavern. Vex flinched at the sudden light but quickly recovered, her gaze sweeping the newly illuminated space. "Better," she conceded, a hint of relief in her tone. They explored the facility together. Torvin noted potential hiding spots, secure alcoves, and pathways. Vex, with her sharper senses, pointed out areas of structural weakness, or places where outside sounds might be more audible. They worked in tandem, an unspoken understanding guiding their movements. In a small, sealed room, they found an ancient data terminal. It was dark, but the power Torvin had restored seemed to reach it. He carefully tried to activate it, his fingers tracing forgotten symbols. Vex leaned over his shoulder, her warmth a comfort against his back. "This is old," Vex observed. "Asterian, but from before the current planetary alliance. Perhaps it holds information." After several attempts, a screen flickered to life, displaying archaic symbols and diagrams. It was a complex interface, beyond Torvin's immediate comprehension. But as he scrolled through a few screens, a particular image caught his eye. A star map, crudely rendered but clearly showing Asteria and several other star systems, one of which Vex recognized. "Kalen," Vex whispered, pointing to a small, distant cluster. "And these are the routes the Kalen ships used to take, escape routes." A spark of hope ignited in her eyes, quickly followed by a shadow of caution. But also the routes the hunters would know. Torvin looked at the map, then at Vex. "This isn't just a hiding place," he said, his voice firm. "This is a starting point. We can learn, we can plan." He reached out, taking her hand, a silent promise exchanged between them. We'll figure it out, Vex, together. Vex squeezed his hand, her green eyes shining with a deep, unwavering trust. The ancient facility, once a symbol of abandonment, now felt like a temporary haven, a strategic point in their dangerous journey. They had found shelter and, more importantly, a new direction. The galaxy was vast, their enemies formidable, but here, in the quiet glow of an old terminal, they were not just survivors. They were strategists, ready to unravel the secrets of the stars, hand in hand. Their journey had indeed just begun, but now they had a map. The star map displayed on the ancient terminal became their immediate obsession. Torvin, ever the pragmatist, focused on understanding the interface. Vex, with her innate understanding of interstellar dynamics, interpreted the data. These lines, Vex explained, tracing a glowing path with her finger, they are not random. They represent established jump lanes, likely charted by early Asterian explorers or even Kaelan traders. The hunters would use these, but they would also expect us to. Torvin nodded, inputting a command he deciphered. A new layer of information appeared, highlighting anomalies along the routes. Are these hazards or hidden bypasses? Both, potentially, Vex replied, her brow furrowed. My people often used less conventional paths to avoid detection. The long dark taught us caution. Her voice held a familiar echo of past fear, but her focus remained sharp. They spent hours hunched over the terminal, the faint glow illuminating their faces. Torvin's technical aptitude combined with Vex's historical knowledge proved a potent team. He learned about gravitational slingshots and nebula drifts. She learned about data compression and energy signatures. Kaelan itself is gone, Vex said softly, pointing to a blank space on the map where her home system should have been. The hunters ensured that. A tremor ran through her, brief but noticeable. Torvin placed a hand on her shoulder. We won't let them take anything else. His words resonated with her, a quiet strength that steadied her spirit. She looked at him, her green eyes reflecting the terminal's light. This station, it is old. Perhaps it holds more than just maps. They decided to systematically explore the facility, searching for anything that could aid them. The station was a labyrinth of forgotten corridors and sealed chambers. Torvin used his restored power to illuminate new sections, revealing rusted machinery and long-abandoned control panels. Vex's heightened senses were invaluable, detecting subtle shifts in air currents or faint echoes of past activity. One particular section, deeper within the station's core, seemed to hum with a low, almost imperceptible energy. It wasn't the station's main power grid, but something else entirely. Torvin pressed his ear against a thick metal bulkhead. There's something behind here, a sealed chamber. Vex placed her hand next to his, her furred ear twitching. A different resonance, not Asterian, not Kaelan. Her voice was a low murmur of curiosity and caution. Using a cutting tool he'd salvaged from a maintenance closet, Torvin meticulously worked on the ancient locking mechanism. Sparks flew, reflecting in Vex's eyes. The air grew thick with the smell of burnt metal. It took concentrated effort and several tense minutes, but finally, the heavy door hissed open with a groan of displaced air. Inside, the chamber was clean, preserved in a strange stasis. In the center sat a single, sleek vessel. It was unlike any ship Torvin had ever seen on Asteria. It was compact, elegant, and bore no visible markings. Its surface shimmered with an unusual pearlescent sheen. Vex gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. A stealth courier from the old Kaelan resistance. My ancestors spoke of these. Legends, almost. Her eyes widened, a mixture of awe and disbelief. They were designed to bypass all known detection arrays. Torvin approached the ship cautiously. It's dormant, but intact. He ran his hand along its hull. Could it work? It should, Vex whispered, circling the vessel. These ships were built to last, to hide. If it has power, if the systems are still viable. A fragile hope, almost too bright to bear, flickered in her gaze. Torvin felt a surge of exhilaration. This was more than a map, it was a potential lifeline. His mind raced, calculating the energy requirements, the repairs needed. He was a chef, not a starship mechanic, but his resourceful nature ignited. We need to check the power core, the navigation systems. Vex touched the ship's surface, a reverence in her movements. This could be our way out, our true escape. But then a shadow crossed her face. But it is also a Kaelan vessel. The hunters will know its type. They will be looking for it. Then we make it undetectable again, Torvin stated, his voice firm. We learn its secrets. We make it ours. He turned to her, a determined glint in his eye. This changes everything, Vex. We have a target, a goal. Vex looked at him, her heart swelling with a warmth that rivaled the ship's dormant power. He wasn't just protecting her, he was actively fighting for their future. His courage, his unwavering belief was a beacon in the darkness. We do, Torvin, we have a chance. They spent the next days meticulously examining the courier. Torvin, drawing on his innate mechanical understanding and the station's data terminal, began to decipher the ship's intricate schematics. The vessel's power core, while offline, appeared to be largely undamaged. Its navigation systems were complex, far beyond anything on Asteria, but he believed he could learn them. Vex, meanwhile, scoured the terminal for any information on operating the specific courier model, often finding ancient Kaelan engineering manuals hidden within the station's archives. During one of their breaks, Vex felt a faint vibration through the station's floor. Her ears flattened. Did you feel that? Torvin paused, his wrench still. He concentrated but felt nothing. What was it? A distant tremor, she said, her green eyes scanning the cavernous chamber. Like a heavy vehicle, above ground. She moved to the sealed door, placing her hand on the cold metal, closer than before. A knot tightened in Torvin's stomach. The hunters were still out there. Their sanctuary, once thought secure, felt less so with each passing moment. The urgency to get the courier operational intensified. He looked at the sleek ship, then at Vex. We work faster. Vex nodded, her expression grim but resolute. They had found a path, a vessel for their hope, but the shadows of their pursuers were drawing nearer. The silent courier represented their freedom, but also a renewed and immediate danger. They were no longer just hiding, they were preparing for a desperate flight, and the galaxy felt vast and unforgiving. Their bond, forged in fear and sustained by hope, was the only certainty in their accelerating journey. The tremors became more frequent, a rhythmic, subtle pulse through the ancient rock. Vex placed her ear to the cold metal of the courier's hull, her sensitive hearing straining. They are definitely above us, Torvin, moving systematically. Torvin felt the vibrations now too, a low thrum against his boots. The urgency in Vex's voice was a physical weight. How systematic. Like a grid search, she responded, her green eyes narrowed. They are sweeping the area. They know this sector holds something. He looked at the partially disassembled control panel of the stealth courier. The main power conduits were reconnected, the core humming softly, but the navigation array remained dark. We need more time. The navigation system is a mess. It's designed for Kaelan interfaces, not Asterian. I found something, Vex said, pulling him towards the data terminal. On the screen, ancient Kaelan script scrolled, accompanied by diagrams. This is a diagnostic overlay. It maps out the energy flow for the long-range navigational systems. The courier uses a unique frequency modulator, a Kaelan design. It's why it was so stealthy, but it's also highly specific. Torvin studied the schematics. His experience with diner equipment was rudimentary compared to this alien technology, but the principles of energy transfer were universal. A frequency modulator. Is it damaged or just offline? Offline, I think, Vex replied, her finger tracing a glowing line on the diagram. But it requires a specific energy signature to initialize, a harmonic frequency. Without it, the system won't even power on. He ran a hand through his hair. And where do we find a Kaelan harmonic frequency generator on Asteria, in a forgotten station, with hunters closing in? Vex turned, her gaze locking with his. The station. It was a Kaelan outpost, Torvin. There has to be something here, some remnant of their technology that could provide the initial pulse. They began a new search, their movements quick and precise. The tremors grew louder, closer, echoing the frantic beat of Torvin's heart. He felt a cold dread creeping in, but Vex's determination was infectious. He watched her move, a shadow in the dim light, her focus absolute. She wasn't just surviving, she was fighting, leading. They moved deeper into the station, past storage bays filled with forgotten tools and crumbling records. Vex's ears twitched constantly, her head swiveling. The sounds are directly above us now. They're pinpointing the general area. We need to be faster, Torvin muttered, scanning the walls. His eyes caught a glimmer behind a rusted utility panel. He pried it open, revealing a dusty compartment. Inside, nestled among ancient wiring, was a small, ornate device. It was a cube of polished obsidian, with faint, glowing Kaelan script etched into its surface. Vex gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. A resonance crystal. My people used these for localized energy projection. They can be tuned to specific frequencies. She carefully took the cube, her fingers brushing the smooth surface. This could work, Torvin. This could be our harmonic pulse. He felt a surge of hope, quickly tempered by the increasing vibrations. Can you tune it? I think so, she said, her brow furrowed in concentration. It's a forgotten art, but the data terminal had some theory on it. We'll need a stable power source to calibrate it. They rushed back to the courier. Torvin connected the resonance crystal to a secondary power conduit of the ship, siphoning a small amount of energy. Vex closed her eyes, her mind reaching out, manipulating the crystal. It began to glow, a soft, ethereal green matching the light in her eyes. The Kaelan script on its surface brightened, then pulsed. It's responding, Vex whispered, her voice strained. I need to find the specific harmonic signature for the navigational array. It's like finding a key to a lock, but the lock is singing 1,000 different songs at once. Torvin knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. You can do this, Vex. Take your time. We're close. A sudden, sharp crack echoed from above. Dust rained down from the cavern ceiling. The tremors were no longer distant. They were directly overhead. The hunters were breaking through. They are directly above the main access shaft. Vex cried, her eyes snapping open. They're coming in. Panic flared in Torvin's chest, but he forced it down. How long? Minutes, not hours, Vex said, her gaze fixed on the resonance crystal, still pulsing erratically. I need more time. He looked at the sealed chamber door, then back at Vex and the unresponsive navigation panel. The courier was a lifeline, but it was still dead in the water. He had to buy them time. Keep working, Torvin said, his voice firm. I'm going to find something to slow them down. Vex grabbed his arm. Torvin, no, it's too dangerous. You're our best chance to get this ship flying, he countered, meeting her gaze. I'm not leaving you to face them alone. I'll just be a diversion, a nuisance. I know this station better than they do. He saw the fear in her eyes, but also understanding. She nodded, her hand still gripping the crystal. Be careful, Torvin, please. He squeezed her hand, always. He grabbed a heavy metal pipe from a nearby rack, its weight reassuring in his grip. He moved towards the main access shaft, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The hunters were coming. He could hear their heavy bootfalls, their muffled voices, getting louder with every second. He was a chef, not a warrior, but he would protect Vex with everything he had. The quiet kitchen, the warm stew, the fragile trust they had built, it all converged into this desperate stand. He would not let them take her. He would not let them break what they had found. He was ready. Torvin peered around the corner of a corroded support pillar. The main access shaft was a gaping maw, leading directly up to the surface. Dust and small rock fragments rained down, illuminated by the harsh, pulsing lights of an energy cutter. A section of the ceiling above was already glowing cherry red. They would be through in moments. He scanned the immediate area, his mind racing. Broken machinery littered the floor, rusted conduits snaked along the walls. An old, heavy maintenance cart sat abandoned near a collapsed section of tunnel. An idea sparked. "Vex, how much longer?" he called out, keeping his voice low, but urgency laced his tone. "Still calibrating. The frequencies are so unstable," Vex replied, her voice strained, echoing from the courier's chamber. "It's like trying to hold liquid light." Torvin gripped the pipe tighter. He had to act. He sprinted towards the maintenance cart, its wheels groaning as he pushed it. It was heavier than he expected, but adrenaline surged through his veins. He shoved it directly into the path of the access shaft, hopping to create a temporary barrier. It wouldn't hold them long, but it would buy precious seconds. A section of the ceiling finally gave way with a screech of metal and a shower of sparks. 3 hulking figures dropped through the opening, their armor dark and angular, energy weapons held ready. Their helmets obscured their faces, but Torvin felt their cold, methodical presence. They were too fast. The cart was barely in place. One of the hunters spotted him immediately. It raised its weapon. Torvin ducked behind the cart, the pipe feeling woefully inadequate against their advanced weaponry. A searing beam of energy impacted the cart, melting a chunk of metal. "Torvin," Vex cried, a note of pure terror in her voice. "I'm fine, keep working," he shouted back, his heart hammering against his ribs. He knew he couldn't fight them. He needed a distraction, something loud and disorienting. His eyes landed on a series of exposed power conduits running along the wall, leading to what looked like an old, unstable generator unit. It hummed with a low, erratic thrum. If he could overload it, even briefly, it might create enough chaos to buy Vex the time she needed. Taking a deep breath, Torvin darted from behind the cart, moving with surprising agility for a man of his build. The hunters opened fire, energy beams scorching the air where he had been. He ignored them, focusing on the conduits. He swung the heavy pipe with all his might, striking the main conduit connection point. A shower of sparks erupted. The generator unit began to whine, a high-pitched shriek building rapidly. Lights in the immediate area flickered violently, plunging parts of the chamber into momentary darkness before flaring back to life. "What was that?" One of the hunters growled, its voice distorted by its helmet's comms. The generator unit bucked and shuddered. Torvin hit the conduit again, harder this time. The whine became a roar, and then, with a deafening crack, the entire unit blew. A concussion wave slammed into Torvin, throwing him backwards. He landed hard, the pipe clattering from his numb fingers. Thick, acrid smoke billowed from the damaged generator, obscuring the chamber. The lights failed completely, plunging them into absolute darkness. Only the faint, erratic pulses from Vex's crystal in the distance provided any illumination. "Torvin, are you hurt?" Vex's voice cut through the ringing in his ears, laced with deep concern. "Just winded," he gasped, pushing himself up, coughing from the smoke. "But they can't see us now." The hunters were shouting, their weapons firing blindly into the smoke. Torvin used the momentary disarray. He crawled through the debris, trying to put more distance between himself and their position, moving deeper into the station's labyrinthine corridors. He could still hear Vex's strained breathing, the desperate focus in her voice as she continued to work on the crystal. He had bought her a little more time, but the hunters were not deterred. Their footsteps were already moving through the smoke, systematically searching. He knew this station better now, its hidden passages and forgotten maintenance tunnels. He was no warrior, but he was a survivor, and he would use every inch of this place to protect her. His heart was still pounding, but a new resolve settled over him. He would not just evade them, he would lead them away into the deeper, more unstable parts of the station, away from Vex and their one chance at escape. He had to be smarter, faster, more unpredictable. He was a chef who had found a love worth fighting for, and he would fight with everything he had. He thought of her luminous green eyes, of the quiet strength she held, and it fueled his every move. He would make sure they got out. He would. Torvin pushed deeper into the station, the acrid smoke still stinging his eyes. He heard the hunters' heavy boots echoing in the darkness, their comms crackling with frustrated orders. He pressed himself against a cold conduit, listening. They were fanning out, methodical, searching for him. This section of the station was a maze of defunct machinery and forgotten storage, perfect for his plan. "Torvin, are you still clear?" Vex's voice, a strained whisper, reached him through his comm. "For now," he replied, keeping his own voice low. "How's the crystal?" "Almost there," she said, her breath catching. "The frequency is stable, just needs to lock onto the ship system. But they are close, Torvin." He knew. He could hear them closer now. Their flashlights cut through the smoke, sweeping across the metallic walls. He saw one beam get dangerously close to his position. He held his breath, pressing tighter against the cold metal. He needed to draw them away, not just evade. He spotted a stack of corroded power cells, abandoned decades ago. They were too unstable to be useful, but perfect for a distraction. He moved silently, his chef's trained hands surprisingly deft in the gloom. He dislodged one, letting it roll with a clatter into a deeper corridor. A hunter shouted, "Did you hear that?" Footsteps immediately redirected. "Over there, move." Torvin smiled grimly in the darkness. It was working. He continued to draw them deeper, using his knowledge of the station's layout. He knew of a section with unstable structural integrity, a forgotten utility shaft that led to a lower level. If he could get them there, he could collapse part of it, not to harm them, but to create a significant delay. He heard Vex again. "Torvin, I have a lock. I'm initiating power sequence to navigation." Her voice held a note of triumph, quickly followed by worry. "But they are splitting up. One is heading your way, the other is circling back towards the ship." His blood ran cold. Splitting up. That meant one of them would find Vex. He had underestimated their strategy. He had to act fast. He changed direction, abandoning the idea of the collapsing shaft. He needed to intercept the one heading for Vex. He moved with renewed urgency, navigating the dark corridors by memory, his hands brushing against cold pipes and grimy panels. He could hear the distinct, heavy thud of the hunter's boots getting closer. He rounded a corner and saw the beam of their flashlight sweeping the corridor ahead. The hunter was tall, armored, and moving with predatory efficiency. Torvin needed a plan, something more than just evasion. He was a chef, not a fighter. But he was also a man who loved deeply. He saw a series of exposed power conduits running along the ceiling, sparking erratically. An idea sparked in his mind. He quickly found a heavy wrench in a forgotten toolbox. He climbed a nearby stack of crates, his movements agile despite his fear. He reached the conduits, the air crackling with energy. He watched the hunter approach, their weapon raised, scanning the shadows. "Torvin, status report." Vex's voice was urgent. "The navigation systems are powering up, but it will take a few more minutes for full calibration. The other hunter is almost at the chamber entrance." "I see the first one," Torvin whispered back. "I'm setting up a surprise." He took a deep breath. This was it. As the hunter stepped directly beneath the conduits, Torvin swung the wrench, striking the main power junction with all his strength. Sparks erupted, showering down, and a piercing alarm blared through the station. The hunter cried out, momentarily stunned and blinded by the sudden burst of light and sound. Torvin didn't wait. He dropped from the crates, grabbing a discarded heavy metal plate. He shoved it into the hunter's legs, sending them sprawling. The hunter's weapon skittered across the floor. Torvin wasn't trying to injure, just to disarm and delay. The hunter recovered quickly, a growl rumbling from their helmet. They lunged for Torvin, their armored fist connecting with his jaw. Pain flared, but Torvin rolled with the impact, scrambling away. He knew he couldn't win a direct fight. He needed to keep them occupied, away from Vex. "Torvin," Vex's voice was a terrified cry. "The other one. They're at the door." He heard a metallic clang from Vex's chamber. He had failed to divert both of them. One was still going for her. "Vex, run!" he shouted, his voice hoarse. He dodged another blow, stumbling back. He looked desperately around the corridor. He saw a heavy blast door, barely functional, leading to a sealed-off section of the station. It was old, rusted, but it might work. He feigned a retreat, drawing the hunter after him, directly towards the blast door. The hunter pursued, confident in their superior strength. Torvin sprinted, reaching the door just as the hunter closed in. He slammed his palm onto the manual override panel. The ancient mechanism groaned, struggling to respond. "No," the hunter roared, realizing his intent. They fired a warning shot, narrowly missing Torvin's head. The heavy door began to slide slowly, agonizingly, into its frame. Torvin squeezed through the narrowing gap just as the hunter reached it, their armored shoulders slamming against the closing door. The hunter was trapped, momentarily pinned. "Torvin, the ship is ready." Vex's voice was a beacon of hope and fear. "Get back here, now." He heard the struggle on the other side of the blast door, the hunter trying to force it open. He knew it wouldn't hold for long. He had bought Vex precious seconds, maybe a minute. He turned and ran, retracing his steps, his jaw throbbing, adrenaline pumping through him. He burst into the courier chamber. Vex was already in the pilot's seat, her luminous green eyes wide with relief and terror. The ship's internal lights glowed, and the navigation console was alive with Kaelin's script. "Get in," she urged, her voice trembling. "The other hunter is inside." Torvin looked around the chamber. Debris was scattered, and a section of the wall near the entrance was scorched. The hunter was nowhere in sight, but the evidence of their presence was clear. They had entered, but where were they? "Where are they?" Torvin asked, strapping himself into the co-pilot's seat. "I didn't see them," Vex confessed, her fingers flying across the controls. "I just heard them. I think they took cover when they realized the ship was powering up. They're waiting." A chilling thought. They were trapped inside the chamber, but the hunter was also inside, hidden, waiting for them to make a move. This wasn't just an escape anymore. It was a siege. "Can we launch?" Torvin asked, scanning the console for anything he could assist with. "Almost," Vex said, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Just need to override the external bay doors. They're sealed shut. The hunter must have done it." The station groaned around them. The sounds of the first hunter, now free from the blast door, echoed from the corridors. They were outside the chamber trying to get in. The other hunter was inside, waiting. Vex's hands moved with practiced speed, but her worry was evident in her tight jaw. "It's taking too long. This override is ancient." Torvin looked at the external bay doors. They were thick, reinforced. A single hunter wouldn't be able to force them open quickly, but the one outside might have equipment to breach them. And the one inside, they were still a complete unknown. "What do we do?" Torvin asked, his gaze fixed on Vex, whose focus was entirely on the controls. "We activate the stealth systems the moment we clear the bay," Vex declared, her voice firm despite the underlying tremor. "Then we vanish. We don't have time to fight them both." Suddenly, a loud crack echoed from above. The hunter inside the chamber had found a new vantage point. A beam of energy scorched the ceiling panel above them, showering sparks. They were attempting to disable the ship from within. "They're targeting the power conduits," Vex cried. "I can't override the bay doors if they hit the primary power relays." Torvin unstrapped himself, his eyes scanning the ceiling. He saw the hunter, high above, crouched on a precarious ledge, aiming their weapon. He needed to create another diversion, something that would keep them from hitting the relays. He spotted a heavy, insulated emergency power cable snaking across the floor. It was thick, too thick to cut easily, but if he could overload it, direct its surge. "Vex," he said, his voice calm, "keep working on the bay doors. I'll handle our friend upstairs." Before Vex could protest, Torvin grabbed a loose metal strut. He sprinted towards the power cable, his plan forming rapidly. He would use the strut to short the cable, creating a surge that would momentarily disable the hunter's weapon, maybe even knock them off their perch. It was a risky move, but it was their only chance. He was a chef, not a soldier, but his resolve was as solid as Kalen's steel. He would protect his home, his love, with everything he had. He thought of the quiet warmth of his kitchen, of Vex's luminous green eyes, and he knew what he had to do. He launched himself forward, the metal strut a clumsy weapon in his grip. The emergency power cable pulsed with contained energy. He braced himself, sweat beading on his forehead, and plunged the strut into the cable's junction. A blinding flash erupted, followed by a violent crackle. The air filled with the sharp scent of ozone. A loud clang echoed from above. The hunter shrieked, a high-pitched, inhuman sound as their weapons sputtered and dropped. They tumbled from their precarious perch, landing hard on the chamber floor with a sickening thud. Smoke billowed from the damaged power conduit, obscuring the impact site. "Torvin," Vex cried, her voice laced with alarm and relief. "That knocked out the auxiliary systems for a moment. I'm back online. Bay doors are opening." Outside, the external bay doors groaned, slowly retracting. Light, stark and unforgiving, flooded the chamber. The hunter Torvin had disabled was stirring, groaning, their form hazy through the smoke. Their weapon lay sparking beside them. "Get us out of here, Vex," Torvin shouted, scrambling back into the pilot's seat, strapping himself in with practiced haste. He glanced at the main view screen. The external hunter, a lean, predatory silhouette, was now visible, standing directly in front of the opening bay doors. Their weapon was raised, aiming directly at the ship. "They won't get another shot," Vex declared, her fingers flying across the controls. The ship's engines hummed, a low, powerful thrum that vibrated through the deck. A low-energy pulse erupted from the ship's forward thrusters, pushing the external hunter back, staggering them. "Hold on," Vex commanded. With a powerful surge, the stealth courier shot forward, blasting through the rapidly opening bay doors. The external hunter was flung backwards, a small, insignificant speck against the vastness of the station's exterior. Torvin felt a jolt as they cleared the threshold, the ship shuddering slightly as if shaking off the confines of the bay. They were free. The ancient station, a decaying hulk of metal and forgotten dreams, rapidly shrank behind them. Asteria, a vibrant blue and green marble, began to fill the view screen. Torvin could see the faint glimmer of the hunter's ship, already attempting to pursue. "Stealth systems activating," Vex announced, her voice tight with concentration. A shimmering distortion enveloped the courier. The stars outside seemed to blur, then sharpen, but the ship's outline vanished from the view screen. "They won't track us now." Torvin let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His hands, still gripping the armrests, trembled slightly. "You did it, Vex, we did it." Vex turned in her seat, her luminous green eyes meeting his. A slow, relieved smile spread across her face, transforming her intense focus into something softer, more vulnerable. "We did it, Torvin, together." He reached across the console, taking her hand. Her fur was soft against his palm, and her grip was strong, reassuring. The warmth of her touch spread through him, chasing away the last vestiges of adrenaline. This was real. They were truly free. "Where to now?" he asked, his voice calmer, a hint of wonder in his tone. The vastness of space stretched before them, an endless canvas of possibilities. Vex leaned back, a thoughtful expression on her face. The Kalen star map showed several potential safe havens, systems far from Kalen space, systems that have remained neutral in the conflicts. One of them, a small outpost named Viridian, was listed as a former Feli-Sapien colony. It might be long abandoned, but it could offer resources, perhaps even a chance to hide in plain sight. Viridian, Torvin repeated, the name tasting new and promising on his tongue. "Is it far?" "A few weeks at maximum sublight speed," Vex replied. "With a functioning stealth drive, we should be able to make the journey unmolested." She squeezed his hand. "We have time. Time to plan, Time to breathe. He looked at the stars, then back at Vex. Her presence filled the small cockpit, a beacon of hope in the endless void. His quiet life on Asteria, his comfortable routine, felt like a distant memory, replaced by this exhilarating, terrifying freedom. He was no longer just a chef. He was a navigator, a protector, an ally. "What about food?" Torvin asked, a small, wry smile playing on his lips. "Space travel always makes me hungry." Vex laughed, a genuine, joyful sound that echoed in the confined space. "I believe this ship has emergency rations. We can adapt them, or perhaps we'll find new ingredients on Viridian." Torvin felt a wave of profound contentment wash over him. The danger was not entirely gone, but for this moment they were safe. They were together, hurtling through the stars, forging a new path. He had risked everything for her, and in return he had gained a universe. He looked at Vex, her green eyes shining with a newfound tranquility, and knew that wherever they went, whatever challenges they faced, their home was now truly within each other. The quiet warmth of his kitchen had simply expanded to fill the limitless expanse of space, carrying them towards an unknown, yet hopeful, future. The weeks blurred into a rhythm of silent stars and shared moments. Torvin learned the courier's quirks, monitoring its systems, while Vex navigated, her green eyes scanning star charts with an intuitive grace. They adapted the emergency rations, Torvin experimenting with flavor combinations from limited stores, Vex often finding unexpected nutritional supplements among forgotten storage compartments. Their bond deepened with each passing day, a quiet understanding that transcended words. One cycle, Vex pointed to a faint blue-green orb on the main viewport. "Viridian, we are almost there." Her voice held a note of anticipation, mingled with a familiar, subtle caution. Torvin felt a surge of adrenaline. What should we expect? The old Kalen record stated it was a terraformed world, lush with varied biomes, Vex explained. A small colony established by those seeking solitude, far from the central systems. It was never heavily populated, certainly not militarized. As they drew closer, Viridian bloomed into vibrant detail. Swathes of deep green forests met shimmering oceans, dotted with what looked like ancient low-profile structures. It was beautiful, tranquil, and eerily silent. Vex skillfully guided the stealth courier through the atmosphere, past clouds that swirled like painted mist. They descended towards a large, secluded valley, shielded by towering, alien flora. Scans show no active energy signatures, no sentient life signs, Vex reported, her brow furrowed in concentration. The colony is indeed abandoned, but the structures remain intact, as do basic environmental controls in some areas. They landed the courier within a concealed cavern entrance Vex identified, a natural formation that swallowed their small ship whole. The air inside was cool, fresh, carrying the scent of damp earth and unknown plant life. Torvin unbuckled, stretching. Time to explore, then. He retrieved a repurposed utility light, its beam cutting through the cavern's gloom. They emerged into a vast, verdant valley. Ancient, domed habitats nestled among thick, vine-covered trees. A gentle breeze rustled through alien leaves, the only sound apart from their own footsteps. Vex led him towards the largest structure, its entrance partially overgrown but otherwise sealed. This was likely the primary communal habitat, Vex observed, her sensitive ears twitching. Power conduits appear intact beneath the surface. Perhaps we can reactivate it. Torvin, ever the pragmatist, examined the entrance hatch. It looks like a maintenance panel here. With some luck, the systems might just be dormant. They spent the next few days working tirelessly. Torvin, with his innate mechanical aptitude honed by years of diner equipment repairs, deciphered the habitat's archaic power systems. Vex, her Kalen physiology granting her acute senses and a deep understanding of energy flows, guided him. Slowly, lights flickered to life within the main dome. Environmental systems hummed, circulating fresh air. Water purifiers began to filter the valley's abundant streams. Inside, the habitat was simple but functional. Living quarters, a communal kitchen, and even a small hydroponics lab lay dormant, waiting for life. Torvin cleaned and organized, his movements familiar and comforting. He found ancient, preserved seeds in the lab, along with basic tools. "We can grow food here," he announced one evening, holding up a small packet of seeds. "This place has everything we need to start again." Vex watched him, a softness in her green eyes he had rarely seen. "You make a home wherever you are, Torvin." He smiled, a genuine, easy smile that reached his eyes. "Only if you are there too, Vex." They established a routine. Torvin tended the nascent hydroponics garden, the scent of fresh soil a welcome change from recycled air. He experimented with cooking new alien plants, his chef's instincts alive with the challenge. Vex explored the valley, mapping its resources, her agility and senses ensuring their safety and understanding of their new world. She found a natural spring, rich in minerals, and identified edible native berries. One evening, as the twin moons of Viridian cast long, silver shadows across the valley, they sat outside their activated habitat. The air was cool and peaceful. Vex leaned against him, her fur soft against his arm. "I do not feel the long dark here," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Not anymore." Torvin wrapped an arm around her, holding her close. "You are safe, Vex, we are safe." He thought of his old diner on Asteria, a life that now felt impossibly distant. He had traded clanking pots and quiet solitude for silent stars and uncharted worlds. He had traded predictability for an unpredictable future, and he would not have it any other way. His purpose, his home, was not a place, but a person. "I never thought I would find this," Vex said, looking up at him, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "A home, a future." "We found it together," Torvin corrected, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "This is our beginning." The universe was vast, full of unknowns and potential dangers, but here on Viridian they had found their haven. They were no longer refugees running from a past, but pioneers building a future. Their love, born in an alleyway, forged in the fires of galactic conflict, now bloomed under alien skies. Torvin, the chef, and Vex, the Kalan survivor, had found their forever, a quiet, profound victory in the boundless expanse of space. They would face whatever came next together, their hearts intertwined, their new world waiting.